Namaste. So, continuing on the writings of Sri Aurobindo, Essays on the Gita, Collected Works of Sri Aurobindo, Volume 19. And last week we read about the Sankhya and Yoga, reconciliation of the two. And the essence of it was that the movement of intelligence, instead of turning outward and downward, must turn inward and upward. This is a wonderful practice, the discerning intelligence. This itself is very liberating. But the only problem is when we engage with this, we tend to move away from the field of work. And there is a reason for it, because initially works absorb us. They pull us out and we are absorbed in it. And they pull us out by the agency of desire for seeking some joy, pleasure, or some result out of it. And when we turn within and upward, there is a tendency to create a division in the being. So, in the first one, Sankhya Yoga, Shri Krishna says, knowledge is superior to action. So, here, now Arjuna learns about Sankhya. So, he says, so what do I do? Now, should I act? He says, yes. Knowledge is superior to action, this is the first. But he says, action is superior. Next he says that. So Arjuna is completely confused. What are you saying? So then he speaks about that there are two kinds of action. One is action which is done in ignorance under the stress of ego and desire. And the other which is an action done in a greater state of consciousness by the greater self. And that's when we see the gospel of work starts. What is that action? So first of all, what is that action? What can be done as part of our karma yoga? And Shri Krishna says all actions. There is no, like generally people think later on in India this tendency came only worship and all these actions or ritualistic actions. They are sacrificed to God. All other actions are for the sake of the ego. But the Gita says very clearly all actions. Sri Aurobindo in fact puts his final seal. He says even the Gita says ghor karma, the action of war, business, everything can be done and should be done, even breathing, even to an extent that movements which are considered completely mechanical. Like when you go to the bathroom, and Sri Aurobindo uses that word, that when you are just simply eliminating things from the body, even that can and should be offered. So one single way for that was, at least I had done that, was putting something of Mother and Sri Aurobindo in the bathroom. So it was a reminder that this is a space also where you need to offer everything to the divine. So every action has to be offered. But then the Gita speaks of the hierarchy of actions. So hierarchy of action is the most material sacrifice, or rather speaks of sacrifice. So what action? So it says the lowest form of sacrifice is the sacrifice of material things, material goods. The mother writes about it very beautifully, same thing, but it's in Collected Works of Mother Volume 2 under the title Charity. So where the material things, when you give, it's the most outward, lowest. And the highest action that one can sacrifice is knowledge. And there the Gita distinguishes between two kinds of knowledge. One is of course the ignorant knowledge, and the other is the higher kind of knowledge which is given as an offering to the divine to awaken mankind for the greater good. But of course, if it is done for money, wealth, fame, etc., it has no meaning, because any sacrifice done for satisfying the ego is no more sacrifice. It's a business, it's a transaction. So in India, this thought was developed to what extent? That's why they had this principle of Guru Dakshina. Even doctors were not supposed to charge money. But patients, there was an embargo on the patient that if he dies without paying the doctor's fees, he goes to hell. So the doctors were safe. But highest forms of giving, healing or knowledge, you can't put a price tag to it. If somebody does it out of joy, it's a different thing. It's an offering. And that offering has to be used wisely and rightly. This was a wonderful principle. That's why in the ashram school, among the many things is that no student is charged and no teacher is paid. And when mother was asked why you want it like this, he said because knowledge in India was never sold. So you see, this sacrifice of works was so deeply, intimately woven into the Indian life. And that's why in Auroville you have the barter system. You make something and it goes to the collective good. So, how are we to do works? Normally, we do works for satisfaction of desires. So, why should one do works? So, why one should do works? The Gita says very simply, for the lok sangraharth, for the forward and collective march of mankind. It's not done for any individual purpose, including the individual spiritual good. Why? Because the moment one has taken away the sting of desire, doing it with some kamna, I will get this, I will get that. The moment we get rid of that, we already have attained to the spiritual good. So the purpose of action is no more spiritual good. It is a constant sacrifice to the eternal. And there, both, they are one and the same. Sri Aurobindo reminds us that sacrifice is a law of creation. That's why the Gita says, Shri Krishna, that by sacrifice I have made this world. Meaning thereby, deep within there is one and oneness. And therefore, sacrifice is the law of creation. If you don't give it, it will be extracted from you. As simple as that. So it is the compulsory divine taxation, but done with the utmost benevolence and compassion. And just like in material taxation, the richer you are, the more you are expected to contribute. So in the law of sacrifice, the greater the degree of development of the being, the more he gives, till a point where he doesn't do anything for his own sake, and all is done for the sake of the divine. So somebody may ask, if one does that, how will he maintain his family? So Gita has a wonderful answer for that, and it's so true to experience. But you can't do this sacrifice with this idea in mind. And that word is Yogakshema Vahamyam. I will take care of you. Now, if you do it with the idea, okay, God will take care of me, let me try it out, it doesn't work. It has to be a very natural, spontaneous expression of one's being, and then the divine takes care. And there are countless examples, I know within the ashram context at least, that how people are looked after in every which way, strange ways, beyond a comprehension. Because when you dedicate your life to the eternal, at the service of the eternal, He takes care. In His own way, He'll take care. But the action should not be done with an eye on the fruit. This is the first fundamental requirement. Does it mean that we should do the action casually, indifferently? That's the next step. Okay, I will not eye on the fruit. So whatever action I'm doing, I'll do indifferently. It doesn't matter. So the second command is, no, you must do it well. Because it's a worship of the eternal. So it doesn't mean I become indifferent to the action, that, well, I'm not doing it for fruits. I have to sit at a shop for 6 hours and I have to sell products. If people come. I can be rude to them. I can be casual to them. No, it should be done with all the details, with the perfection of a divine worker. Because it's our service to the eternal. This is another, kind of cul-de-sac in which people enter. That, okay, I'm not doing it for work. I'm not doing it for human beings. So I can afford to be just casual, indifferent. No. On the contrary, all the more reason, because we are not only doing it for the divine, we are representing the divine, so we must be much more. One should strive for success and not failure. Should be in those words. But if failure comes, we should pass it on to Him, know that it is a passage. If success comes, we should not take it, see, I did it. There is a very nice poem of Sri Aurobindo, the Divine Worker, where he says, victory is thy passage, mirrored through fortune's glass. Failure is cradled on thy deathless arm. So, you have held it. Means failure is a preparation. You have put something on hold. It will one day bring whatever the divine desires the result to be. But for now it is failure. Like the French Revolution, like the 1857 Sipahi Mutiny. They were failures, but they had sown the seed, cradled on thy deathless arms. And victory, like that Ken Upanishad, we are the victors, we have done this, we have done that. Some people take a lot of joy in saying that, I did this, I did that. But a true yogin lives in that state that he is not the doer. And how this state comes is very interesting. Actually, it can come by pure analysis. So I remember at 16, this thought used to come to me that, who am I? So if you really analyze yourself, you will see that none of the parts that constitutes you is your. Something has come from parents, something from society, something from education. It's all conditioning. And then the next step is you discover who is the doer. We say that I am intelligent. Who gave you the intelligence? It came from nature. Somebody says I am strong. Who gave you the strength? It came from nature. That's how we are built. So who is the doer? So the first step to recognize is that nature is the doer. It is nature which is solely the doer. So what is our role? Our role is to give sanction, to make our choices, to put it that way. And the choice should be based on the discerning intelligence. So now the whole puzzle gets solved. That why this state of impersonality is required is to make the right choice. And then next step, to offer it to the divine. So initially we make the choices, we do the work, and that work's results is offered to the divine. Later on there comes a state which the Gita describes as Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. It's only an interregnum, when transitional stage, when the buddhi is making the choice. Next stage is when there is Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. People interpret it as that, well, I'll do nothing. So Shri Krishna makes it very clear, it cannot ever be that by not doing anything, nothing is being done. Still action will happen in you, through you. It may be the most mechanical actions. Breathing is an action. So the Gita definition of karma is not just, we think I'm doing a job. You will act, continue to act, because within you nature is there. Nature will continue to act. And it will act according to nature's impulsion within a person. So then it raises another question that, well, a yogin understands that he is not the doer, and yet a mighty action is done by such a person. So the next question comes then, if still we have to act, what is the basis on which we act? Okay, we do lok sangraharth. That's a motive. But what is the action that I should undertake? So there is a very interesting line in the Gita which Sri Aurobindo explains in great detail, that you will act according to your true nature. Now this becomes a bit of a tricky thing. What's my nature? So a lot of people will say, I can't help it. I get angry and I'm doing it. No, that's not what the Gita means. The Gita means that there is a true nature within everyone. And there is things which come from this world and cover it up. This is the fundamental philosophy of yoga, Vedanta, that there is within us a divine nature. By that it means a divine impulsion, a true impulsion. And this true impulsion takes a deviant turn because of different forces that come and occupy the fields of nature. So then it takes the example, for instance, it teaches us about Swabhava and Swadharma. So what is Swabhava? Swabhava is the true self mode in the becoming. And Swadharma is the action which is governed by that self mode. That is the true movement. But how it can get distorted, we'll see very beautifully in Savitri, the triple soul forces. So in the triple soul forces, Sri Aurobindo first describes the true soul movement. They are soul forces. So one can see them as Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, and in each one of them there is a true movement. For instance, the true movement of Madonna of suffering is to bring hope, to heal, to help and people endure that suffering that is there. But the false movement is where a person says, I am born for suffering, God has marked me out. That's an asuric consciousness. It can go to an extreme where people self-mortify themselves. It should never be regarded as anything to do with God-like movements. Extremely asuric movement where people suffer, make themselves suffer, whether by pricking their tongue or lashing themselves on the back, or laying on a bed of thorns or nails. This is not what the divine wants from us. He wants us to become magnets to express His will, channels to express His will in the world. That's what the Gita tells us. So His will is so that the entire humanity moves upward on its great march of ascension. So Lok Sangraharth come from there. Lok Sangraharth is not feeding the poor, that I am feeding thousands of poor people, therefore I am doing for Lok Sangraharth. Literally that term means to hold the march of humanity together. And this march of humanity is towards a great event. And all that comes in the way of this expression of Swadharma must be removed. That's why there was code of conduct for the Kshatriya, code of conduct for the Brahmin, code of conduct for the Vaishya, and code of conduct for the Shudra. Now, yes, time spirit has broken it, and it's good it is broken. Something new is coming up in its place, but we must understand what it was. Basically, in today's context, we can say, follow the true divine impulsion within us. Now, that's not easy to find as long as we are driven by preferences, desires, and we make the choices under the stress of desire, we cannot really discover the true divine impulsion. So, to discover this true divine impulsion, one has to practice Nishkam Karma. That's the principle of. And work should be done as a sacrifice. Now, here, sacrifice is not about self mortification. It means literally to refine, purify, uplift, and eventually divinize. So, there is this fire in which an action is put. The same action. Now you see how society was organized so that things can get refined, purified, uplifted, divinized. So the whole purpose of sacrifice was one, a recognition that I am not alone and God and world are not here to fulfill my desire. Second, it was a means to uplift our natural movement towards greater and greater heights. So a person who has the warring instinct, he could war just for his own. We have this typical example several times I have said. What is the difference between Karna and Arjuna? Karna is driven by an egoistic motive. One egoism was that my friend, he gave me the kingdom, therefore I must defend him. It doesn't matter what dharma is. So though he is a Kshatriya, a true Kshatriya, yet he falls from that movement. And therefore his death is typified in the way he dies. Fallen from grace. Whereas there is a true movement, and that's what we see in Arjuna, surrendering all his skills at the feet of the divine, and he says, tell me what I have to do. So, when the command comes to fight the battle, it jolts all his nervous sensational being because it goes against his grain of egoistic preferences. As a sattvic person, why would he kill his own people even if it is for the sake of kingdom? He doesn't want that. Because he's a sattvic person. Unlike Karna, who shows intense rajas. Even his sattva is, that generosity is intense rajas. I give every day morning, whoever comes to me. That's famous about Karna. But Arjuna in the scale of evolution is sattvic. So he says, yes, I should fight for the right. But why against my own kith and kin? How can I do it? And that's where Shri Krishna teaches him to rise above the guna and be just an instrument and channel of the divine. So by desireless action, by surrendering the fruit of the action, by doing the action skillfully with eye on perfection. In fact, it's so true that actually when you eliminate this craving for result, not only your choice improves, your action actually undergoes improvement. Because you are not suffering from what is called today as a performance anxiety. Or a anxiety about the results. What is going to happen? What's going to happen? No, because then you can become a free-flowing channel of the divine. It doesn't matter. People may appreciate, they may not appreciate. You may get accolades, you may get brickbats. Nothing matters because you just want to offer it at the feet of the divine. So next stage is remember and offer. So every action before we start and when we conclude must be inwardly offered. It's an inner offering. It has nothing to do with outward. Outward offering can sometimes be very ostentatious. In one of my talks in Nainital, somebody said, Dr. Saab, bolte to bada acha ho. Ek gadbad hai. I said, kya gadbad hai? What is? There is one problem with you, one defect. Everything else is nice. Before you start the talk, you must say, Hari Om. And he said so dramatically, I couldn't help laughing because he said so dramatically, you must say Hari Om. So I said, I say something greater than Hari Om. He said, what? I say Ma, World Mother. So that's, but inwardly, you don't have to. No. Then he started teaching me all about Hari and Om. I said, okay, thank you so much for the kind advice. What does else you do after all this? So it is an inner state of offering. It is not something which you have to necessarily close your eyes, and that may be necessary in the early stages. Close your eyes and observe 1 minute of silence. When the mind is roaming around, 1 minute is over. What shall I do now? It's a joyous, glad offering. That's why if a sacrifice is not done in a glad state, it has no meaning with regard to the divine. If it is done under a state of compulsion, oh, what to do? Drudgery. I have to do this work. Why? Because destiny. God has given me this work. It can happen anywhere. It can happen in an ashram setting. That you are doing a work and you see, this fellow, why is he doing a better work than, whereas I am more qualified. So, I should be there. I can run the show better. Hari Divine knows what he is doing. Leave it. It's okay. Maybe you can run the show better, but the Divine wants the show to run worse. His mystery. How do you know? Maybe he wants to give him his chance and sabka time aayega. So, you don't know. So we should learn to have that humility that the Divine knows what he is doing, his task. So whatever is the task appointed by our own nature and by God. This is how the Gita describes. Your own nature and God. These are the two things which we must consider. So if the true nature is to fight for the righteous cause. Doesn't matter. That's what he tells Arjuna, that because your true nature is of a Kshatriya, if you abandon this work, then it will be mithyachar. What is mithyachar? That inwardly I have this urge, but outwardly I am saying, no, I will follow non-violent methods. So that's called falsehood. That was unfortunately taught to a whole nation. And what was the result of it? We started practicing mithyachar. And not only that, we started feeling very vain. We are a non-violent nation. Yes, by all means be non-violent. But at least defend yourself when there is an attack. That's a very justified and valid thing. So mithyachar is when you are practicing something which is not consistent with your own true divine impulsion. If the divine impulsion is to fight for that which is right and true and beautiful, by all means have the courage and do it. Doesn't matter what's going to come, and do it as an offering to God. So this works as sacrifice for the larger Lok Sangrahart, done with an eye on perfection and details, but as an offering. So it releases us into a vast impersonality and brings in us that sense of closeness to the divine. We begin to live in God. That's what the Gita describes picturesquely. Brahman is offering to Brahman and Brahman is receiving. It can be so wonderful applying this even in everyday sphere. And one of them is, I remember that wonderful saying of the mother about what is love. She says it is only the divine who loves. So, it is the one who is in one form, the divine is reaching out to the divine in another form, and the forms become conduits to link the two. Which is so much more beautiful than being bound by bonds of attachment, social, religious, mutual self-interest, etc. It's all these things require time to practice, but the Gita is a practical book. So, this is the basic. So, I'll read some of the passages. The one thing needful, the saving principle, constant in all these variations, is to subordinate the lower activities, to diminish the control of desire and replace it by a superior energy, to abandon the purely egoistic enjoyment for that diviner delight which comes by sacrifice, by self-dedication. So whatever we were trying to find by these means, much more will come. See, that's why people say, Bhagwan ki seva mein kya milta hai? What do you get by divine service? We get instant payment. Paytm, original Paytm, divine Paytm. What is that instant payment? Delight. All that you are trying to get, ultimately I'll get the monthly pay, then I'll invest it, then I'll get some money, I'll buy this because I'll be happy. By then, you can't even enjoy life. Some people, all our life I have sacrificed, first for family, then children, and God knows. And they were doing it when we are old, we will lead a happy, retired life. They are waiting that when this period of retirement will be over and we can get back. But if you offer to the divine, there is an instant delight. That's the joy. So he says, by self-dedication, by self-mastery, because you have to give up desired self. All this will come again and again. Pleasure will come, money will come, wealth will come, ambition will come, need for fame will come. All this will come and draws. Recognition will come. By the giving up of one's lower impulses to a greater and higher aim, they who enjoy the nectar of immortality, left over from this sacrifice, attain to the eternal Brahman. You give to the divine in completeness. What you will get, leave it to him. Left over from the sacrifice. Sacrifice is the law of the world, and nothing can be gained without it. Neither mastery here nor the position of heavens beyond. Even in ordinary life, the law of sacrifice prevails. You want to become a good doctor, you have to sacrifice some other interest. You can't say, exceptional people can probably take up multiple things, but generally you have to follow that law of sacrifice. But there are gradations, the range of these various forms of sacrifice. The physical offering, the lowest, where we offer, food and such things. The sacrifice of knowledge, the highest. So, in practical terms, to start with it means, we all have this idea that I know. I'm talking of the individuals. I know. Now, when sacrifices to the divine, one stands in utter humility and says, Lord, until now, I was the biggest fool believing that I know. And if you don't believe this basic truth that you don't know, there are people who will tell you that you don't know. Respect them, keep them near you. They are the real helpers on the way. So, I don't know. Illumine my mind. So, and then there will be illuminations, inspiration. Even offer that back. Not that, okay, now I am having intuitions. No, keep on offering that till the very highest one arrives at. Knowledge is that in which all this action culminates, not any lower knowledge, but the highest self-knowledge and God knowledge. That which we can learn from those who know the true principles of existence. This knowledge cannot be had just by reading a book. That by possessing which we shall not fall again into the bewilderment of the mind's ignorance and into the bondage to mere sense knowledge. So, in this knowledge, what is the hallmark? Thou shalt see all existences without exception in the self, then in me. So, this is the principle. So again he says, what will be the motive? The motive will be not personal desire on the intellectual, moral, emotional level, for that has been abandoned. It cannot be the spiritual call to his perfect self-development by means of disinterested works, for the call has been answered. The development is perfect and fulfilled. His motive of action can be only the holding together of the peoples, Lok Sangraham. This great march of the peoples towards a far-off divine ideal has to be held together, prevented from falling into the bewilderment, confusion and utter discord. And that's why the Gita says that those who have advanced should not confuse those who have not gone beyond. Don't bewilder them. It should not be, let's everybody join the ashram or everybody start following yoga. See how Swami Vivekananda, he himself is a great renunciate, and somebody comes and tells him, I want to renounce the world. He says, what do you have to renounce the world? What do you have to renounce? Go and earn money. Now it may sound like a very strange advice, but one should not create confusion. It's the march of humanity moving in a certain way. There are steps and stages, and you don't make people skip stages. The best, the individuals who are in advance of the general line and above the general level of the collectivity, are the natural leaders of mankind. For it is they who can point to the race both the way they must follow and the standard or ideal they have to keep or to attain. But the divinized man is the best in no ordinary sense of the word, and his influence, his example must have a power which that of no ordinary superior man can exercise. And then comes the best example of the bestest best, and that is Sri Krishna himself. So after he says all this, he says, you see Arjuna, I have nothing to gain. All the three worlds I am supporting. I don't need to really enter this battle. Yet I am entering it. And that becomes God's own example. And Sri Aurobindo emphasized on it. So avatar, there are many aspects of the avatar. One of them is he sets the example for world and humanity. And often people have this tendency to take the last, oh, Sri Aurobindo withdrew into his room. I know people who suddenly shut themselves into a room. And they think that they are doing Sri Aurobindo's yoga. And when people would ask Sri Aurobindo, he would say, there is a likelihood that you will lose your mind. Look at Sri Aurobindo before he came to Pondicherry. Right in the middle of, in the jail, in the revolutionary movement, he is editing 3 journals, organizing revolutionary activities, what not. And in all this, he was like a Jivan Mukta, in that Brahmi Sthiti. And even after that, till 1926, Sri Aurobindo kept himself. He met people, he was doing things. Evening talks were there. Then subsequently, yes, after 1926, because it required a very special action, and the mother said, okay, I'll take care of the, all that you have been doing. So you can focus on that. And by then he was still keeping contact with all the things in the world and acting upon it by his subtle occult force. So, all this. So, what are the signs of a Jivan Mukta? So, the first sign is, of course, the true knowledge and the true vision. The liberated man is not afraid of action. First sign. He doesn't have jugupsa. I'll do this, I won't do this. This is spiritual, this is mundane. That is, even the Ishopanishad says that, tato na vijugupsate. He doesn't say, no, this doesn't suit me, I'll do another kind of work. He is not afraid of action. He is a large and universal doer of all works. Krishna karam krit, not as others do them in subjection to nature, but poised in the silent calm of the soul, tranquilly in yoga with the divine. The divine is the Lord of his works. And that is the significant story in Rajsu Yagya of Yudhishthir. When everybody asks, what work shall we give to Krishna? And Krishna says, I will pick up the, when people eat, so after they finish the food, I'll pick up the plates and give it for washing or whatever, to dispose it off. Now, does Krishna's stature become low by doing it? No. Krishna is Krishna. It doesn't matter what he does, which way he does. So, sarv karmani. This idea, there is a big work, there is a lesser work, there is a high work, there is a low work, is not consistent with the true truth of things, because Brahman is the sole enjoyer and nature is the sole doer. And Sri Aurobindo in the Life Divine describes this is one of the great illusion. And he says that Brahman invests as much energy in the shock of a star, blaze of a star, as in that little grain of dust and atom of existence. The hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl. So this idea that this work is good, this is bad, this is big, this is small, must pass away completely once and for all. Whatever work the divine gives us, wherever we are placed, through that we can arrive at yoga. So it's so beautiful. People often say, oh, Sri Aurobindo is very difficult to practice, we cannot read him. Don't worry, if you cannot read him, serve him. The only way, Sri Aurobindo, mother said, no, that who can understand Sri Aurobindo? He is as vast as the universe. And his teaching is infinite. Who can understand Sri Aurobindo? The only way To come a little closer to Him is to love Him and to serve Him unconditionally. Give oneself to Him. He says, then you will come closer. Nobody is saying that in this yoga you have to read the Life Divine. This is nothing but a strange resistance of the human consciousness. That you must read the Life Divine, understand it thoroughly, then only you can engage in the yoga. It's good if you read it. It's good if you understand it. It's wonderful because it's... Why wouldn't you read something which is written by someone whom you love? Whether we understand or not doesn't matter. But that's not a precondition to undertake yoga. Sri Aurobindo at one place says that while intellectual activity can be a good and powerful preparation, but if this became the criteria for undertaking the yoga, then hardly anybody would be prepared for that. So that's all right, wonderful. If you are drawn towards it, and it's always good to read something to keep, to open the mind to a deeper understanding. So this is the first. To do all in this liberating knowledge without the personal egoism of the doer is the first sign of the divine work. All means all. In the Synthesis of Yoga, there are 2 chapters. And one of them, first time when I had read it, I said, my God, what does it mean? Works of love. I said, I had never heard. What is works of love? And Sri Aurobindo explains that even that, all energy that is going into this creation, including the energy of your feelings, it is doing an action in this world. It is also a work. The second sign is freedom from desire. For where there is not the personal egoism of the doer, desire becomes impossible. It is starved out, sinks for want of a support, dies of inanition. So one has to thoroughly search. There is a line in Savitri, you must search our beings with a spiritual fire. Anything. Am I doing it because I will get something? It could be a work that we are given to do. It could be simply dressing up. Am I dressing to effect? It could be a relationship. Am I trying to take advantage? Am I doing it because what it will bring to me? So all that has to go. Outwardly, the liberated man seems to undertake works of all kinds, like other men. On a larger scale, perhaps, with a more powerful will and driving force. So this idea that, liberated man doesn't engage. On the contrary, the ideal yogin has a much more powerful action because he's no more working for a little limited egoistic action for self-satisfaction, but for lok sangrahat. For the might of the divine will works in his active nature, but from all his inceptions and undertakings, the inferior concept and nether will of desire is entirely banished. Sarva samarambha kama sankalpa pavrijita. He has abandoned all attachment to the fruits of his works, and where one does not work for the fruit, but solely as an impersonal instrument of the master of works, desire can find no place. And see, there is something very interesting qualification. Not even the desire to serve successfully, for the fruit is the Lord's and determined by Him, and not by the personal will and effort, or to serve with credit and to the master's satisfaction, for the real doer is the Lord Himself, and all glory belongs to a form of His Shakti. I remember once Bangalore, there was problems in the Bhavan and they asked me to take over as a secretary. So, as usual, sat together, we said, okay, fine. Opened a page from prayers and meditation. What should be my attitude? And there was a prayer that even in divine works, you must be disinterested. I said, this is a bouncer. How do I be disinterested? I was looking forward to it. I'll do it with all this. Disinterested. Then I realized that there is no personal interest involved of any kind. You do it well. Do it with perfection. No personal interest. And that is the perfection of the divine work. It does not follow that the work is not to be done perfectly, with success, with the right adaptation of means to ends. On the contrary, a perfect working is easier to action done tranquilly in yoga than to action done in the blindness of hopes and fears. Yoga, says the Gita elsewhere, is the true skill in works. Yogaha karmashu kauslam. That's how it comes. Because you're no more doing it for yourself. And one of the examples I remember, it may look strange, but it was a wonderful example. Somebody came here for the first time and he lost his key to the suitcase. So he asked what is to be done. So in the ashram there was a department where they could do that. It was not a department for opening suitcases, but they could make it. I guess it was probably Harpagon or someplace. I don't know where it could be. So the person went there and he opened the suitcase, made a key, and he said, "Okay, thank you so much." No, wait. I have to make a duplicate. He said, "No, I don't need it." He said, "No, it's not because of your need or not need. It's my service to the mother. What if you lose this key? I must do it well." Now this, he was not doing for money. He could have said, okay, it's done. Take it, very nice. I close my shop. But it was his work for the mother. So it was done with that eye. The result may be success as the ordinary mind understands it, or it may seem to that mind to be defeat and failure, but to him it is always the success intended by the all-wise manipulator of action and result. So he is saying to the ordinary mind it may seem one way or the other, but the all-wise knows what is to be done. Then the third sign is the liberated man has no personal hopes. He does not seize on things as his personal possessions. Again, from money, people, anything. Oh, I possess them. He receives what the divine will brings him, covets nothing, is jealous of none. What comes to him he takes without repulsion and without attachment. What goes from him he allows to depart into the world of things without repining or grief or sense of loss. Mind you, this state people try to imitate. I possess nothing, so I am just going on an unbridled rampage of activity. No, it doesn't mean that. Because you are going on an unbridled rampage for seeking of pleasure. It's not that which is meant. If things come in the course of your natural growth destiny, you take them as gifts from the divine. They may look pleasant, they may look unpleasant, but you are not receiving it with this idea in mind. But equally, when it goes, you are not filled with grief and filled with sorrow and suffering because you never coveted, you never possessed it. You let it go. Let it go, it doesn't mean, okay, go. It may go in the course of evolution of life. Therefore, he does not, by stress on doing and its objects, bring about in his mind and heart any of those reactions which we call passion and sin. For sin consists not at all in the outward deed, but in an impure reaction of the personal will, mind, and heart which accompanies it or causes it. What is sin? Selfish desire. Desire by its nature is selfish. Selfishness, egoism, desire, coveting attitude, greed, jealousy, fear. This is sin. It's not the action itself. So, again, the sign of the divine worker is that which is central to the divine consciousness itself. A perfect inner joy and peace which depends upon nothing in the world for its source or its continuance. It is innate. It is the very stuff of the soul's consciousness. It is the very nature of the divine being. Therefore, the ordinary man depends upon outward things for his happiness. Therefore, he has desire. Therefore, he has anger and passion, pleasure and pain, joy and grief. Therefore, he measures all things in the balance of good fortune and ill fortune. And this can be so much misunderstood. At least I remember when my mother died. That day I went for my class as usual. And people didn't know that she has died. Somebody called up for birthday and greeted birthday. But they noticed it. After 2 months when my father died, then my superiors, they started saying, is he normal? I am supposed to cry, be filled with grief? It just didn't come. It was not something tried. It didn't come. They've gone to mother. It's something fine. So this happens automatically, this change, that when things are taken away from you, and sometimes it can be very funny experience. I'll share one experience where I lost and found my scooter. So So it was living in Pune, outside the barracks, single rooms. We had a scooter. And I used to go to the mess for food and then come back. That day, I went on my scooter to the mess. And I met my friend and we started discussing all about geometric progression, evolution and all these things. I completely, after a long, wonderful walk, came back to my room. And I said, where's my scooter? It's gone. So I said, okay, Divine wants me to practice samatha. His scooter is gone. I'll practice samatha. So I practiced samatha. Had a very peaceful sleep. Very, very happy. See, Divine has helped me to practice samatha. And then I walked to the mess because now I have no choice. And I realized my scooter is standing there. I said, wow, this is the least painful samatha. So this is how it will come if it is needed. So this is state which develops. And samatha is not something which will come immediately. In different areas, it extends itself. That equality, impersonality, peace, joy, freedom do not depend on so outward a thing as doing or not doing works. So it will be very much misunderstood by people because people expect that you should be unhappy, you should cry, you should look as if you are, So if you don't have these things, when you are supposed to have these things, it may look very strange. They may even wonder that, are you really happy with the event? Maybe that's why you are not crying. But it is this inner state of felicity which you enter into because you understand this. Things like jealousies, don't prick you. And yet you continue to have goodwill, love, everything. So it is a wonderful state to be in. The Gita insists repeatedly on the difference between the inward and outward renunciation. Tyaga and sannyas. The latter, it says, is valueless without the former, hardly possible even to attain without it, and unnecessary when there is the inward freedom. So, sannyasa is when you want to, now I become a sannyasi. So, I will have nothing to do with all my life till now. So, if somebody asks me about whatever, medical or this thing, so I'll say, no, now I am only a sannyasi. Or, let's say you are married, you have children. So you don't start saying they are no more my children. Be careful, don't make such. No more my children. I have no wife, I have no husband, I have nobody. That's not required. Nor do you say, no, I am not going to now henceforth live together because I have become a sannyasi. Sannyasi may do that, but yogi is greater. That's exactly what he says. Inner renunciation. You are with everything and yet you are connected to the divine and not with anything. So this should be the state. He should be known as the eternal sannyasin, who neither hates nor desires. Free from the dualities, he is happily and easily released from all bondage. So this is what Sri Aurobindo reveals to us. And yet this liberation does not at all prevent him from acting. The man who knows the principle of things thinks his mind in yoga, I am doing nothing. When he sees, hears, touches, and yet all action is done through him. This is that state in which you have that, even while doing everything, you are doing nothing. And this is such a wonderful release because you don't carry the burden of all that doership. So there is this beautiful bhajan of Dwijendra Lal Roy. Tomar karmo tumi karo ma, loke bole koryami, sokala tomari iksha. All is your will, expressing through countless ways. Not that, it is expressing through me with others. No. In everybody there is one will expressing itself. People think that I am the doer, but I know that you are the doer. So this is the state of the divine worker and the practice of works as sacrifice. The last bit, which I'll read. Equality is the sign and also for the aspirant the test. Where there is inequality in the soul, there is evidence, in evidence, some unequal play of the modes of nature, motion of desire. Every time we are troubled or distressed, You must look inside. What is that desire? It is taking the form of a concealed expectation. You see, it's natural. Some wish, some want, like a thief stealing inside. So one has to look inside and say why one is troubled and eliminate it thoroughly. It's a painstaking process, because even when you eliminate in one area, it is seen up in another area. You may be very equal in terms of food. You may be very unequal in terms of your heart. You may be equal in terms of your heart. You may be very unequal in terms of your mind, thoughts, viewpoints. So one has to practice this equanimity constantly. So he reminds us when Nirodha once said that, I had a bit of cold and I feel all this world is illusion. What yogis realize after great effort, I have realized so soon. So Sri Aurobindo says, sir, it is the blues which follow the cold. It has nothing to do with any realization. This kind of temporary vairagya is quite common. And at another point, in the same letter, it comes a little later, or maybe in another letter, someone complains to him. He speaks to him that, when I am doing, people come and tell me something. Some say he is such a hard doctor, he doesn't smile, all these things. So Sri Aurobindo says that, what am I to do? Sri Aurobindo says, look here, you have to practice samta. I had my time to practice samta. Past MA. Your turn, please. I have done my MA practicing samta. Your turn. Can you imagine? Sri Aurobindo, somebody filed a court case of kidnapping a 17-year-old. The person came, wanted to be, and Sri Aurobindo accepted. Samatha, I have passed my test, MA. Now your turn, please. So this is a test, it will keep coming. We immediately start, what is God doing with me? Why he is doing this? He is making us into real steel, which we want to become. Thank God he is doing this to me, because he thinks I am ready and capable of practicing this samta. That's why he is doing it to me. Where there is inequality of soul, there is deviation from knowledge. Loss of steadfast abiding in the all-embracing and all-reconciling oneness of the Brahman and unity of things. So these deviations may come, get back. They may come, get back. That's the process. It doesn't come today, from today I am going to be equal in everything. It doesn't work like that. It's a process. It's a dynamic, evolves through time. But at some point one has to start. And equality is the word Sri Aurobindo stresses the most, and he says there are three ways of doing it. One is through a kind of state of tamas, where you are indifferent to things. The second is stoic, heroic. And the third is an illumined, sattvic, philosophical equality. Such is the nature of life. But this is not the equality of which Gita speaks of. Gita speaks of the equality of the soul. These can be initial stages for practice. But the true equality of the soul and spiritual consciousness is when it knows all is the expression of that one Brahman, of the one divine, in various ways. And all are safe in God's heart. And it is He who alone is acting through all the multiplicity of creation, through the mechanism of nature. When we know this, then we are in a state of equality. Namaste.